Mr. Speaker, we come to this House floor tonight to pay our respects to a distinguished former member of this body, a former vice president and a former president of the United States on the occasion of the centennial of his birth. Mr. Speaker, today we pay tribute to the life and legacy of George H.W. Bush on what would have been the week of his 100th birthday on June 12th. And Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days for which to submit related material of this special order to the record.
Without objection.
I thank you. And to start this tribute to George Bush, what better person than to call on the distinguished gentlewoman from Texas, someone who also moved to Texas to find her career and find her success, just like George H.W. Bush did as well. Beth Van Duyne distinctly represents North Texas. She's a former mayor of Irving. She's a former official, the regional administrator for the Department of Housing and Urban Development for President Trump. She has been at the top of her game in the executive branch, in this legislative branch, the House of Representatives, and in local government as a city council woman and mayor. So I yield to my friend, Ms. Van Duyne, for such time as she may consume.
Thank you very much, and I thank the kind gentleman from Arkansas for his comments. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor what would have been George H.W. Bush's 100th birthday, to remember his life, legacy, and service to our nation. Few people have left an impact so profound that one can truly be defined by service to others. As the 41st President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush epitomized integrity and humility. He served our country with unwavering dedication from his early days in the military to his tenure as Commander-in-Chief and beyond. He understood what a lot of leaders have forgotten, that the purpose of leadership is not to seek personal gain or notoriety, but to act selflessly in service of America. Beyond the man we looked up to as Commander-in-Chief, I remember President Bush as a man who could connect with anyone and meet them where they were. During the second inauguration of his son, George Walker Bush, I attended and I went for a tour of the White House. And it was to our astonishment that we turned into the Blue Room and boom, there was the former President H.W. Bush standing in the middle of the room. We were with a small group and there was a 10-year-old boy that was wearing an Indianapolis Colts jersey. And I just saw the look on the former president's face as he ran up to this 10-year-old kid and he said, "Are you a Peyton Manning fan?" And the kid, with this look of glory in his eyes, staring at what was the past president of the United States, said, "Yes, sir, I am." Then H.W. Bush recounted a story when he was president, I guess when he met Peyton Manning for the first time. He went to a football game, and Peyton Manning came running over to him to give him a football. And he said, "Here I am, the President of the United States, and I was so excited to meet Peyton Manning. I was thrilled. Here was my hero on the field." This was a man who was nearly 80 years old at the time and could still share the excitement of a ball with his 10-year-old child. He could relate with anyone. And it was so touching to see this side of our legendary statesman, to hear President Bush get excited as he recounted his first meeting with his favorite football player. And he shared this joy years later with some strange 10-year-old kid who just melted when he spoke. In the words of his son, George Walker Bush, H.W. showed how public service is noble and necessary. Rather than immediately pursue his education at Yale University, where he had already been accepted, on the day of his high school graduation, which was on his 18th birthday, when our country had entered World War II, George Herbert Walker Bush enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve, receiving his wings as the youngest pilot in naval history at the time, completing his training at Naval Air Stations Corpus Christi. During World War II, Bush flew 58 combat missions, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross after being shot down by Japanese anti-aircraft fire. Somehow he managed to finish his mission, embodying his determination and American patriotism. Following in his father's footsteps, Bush eventually attended Yale before deciding to embark on his own journey. Determined to forge his own path, he left his East Coast roots behind, and he moved his young family to West Texas, and he began working in the oil industry. He was drawn to the can-do spirit of the Lone Star State and all the possibilities that the state had to offer, something many of us Texans can still relate to. After working as an oil field equipment salesman, he moved his family and newly found oil development company from Midland to Houston, where he contributed to the creation of countless jobs. After establishing himself as a leading force in Texas, he became the Republican Party chairman in Harris County, where he developed grassroots connections and cultivated relationships with members throughout his community, even serving for a year as a part-time professor of administrative science at Rice University. However, public service ran deep in his veins. And in 1966, Mr. Bush was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for Texas' 7th District. He went on to serve 2 years as a representative in the 2 terms as a representative in the U.S. House. He sat on the Ways and Means Committee as a freshman, which is no small feat. He became chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief of the U.S. Liaison Office to China, and director of the Central Intelligence Agency. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at a time of challenge and controversy. After Mr. Bush fell short in the race for the Republican nomination for President of the United States in 1980, losing out to Ronald Reagan, he was chosen to serve as the candidate for Vice President. As any of us who have ever been in the arena and lost a battle understand, it is no easy feat to act graciously in the face of defeat, let alone put aside personal ambitions in favor of loyalty to your opponent. But that's exactly what George Bush did as Reagan's vice president, never trying to upstage him or expressing disagreement. When President Reagan was term limited, it wasn't just George H.W. Bush's remarkable life of service and indisputable qualifications that inspired faith in the American people, but his never-ending desire to put others before himself. He once said, any definition of a successful life must include service to others. Advocating for federal deregulation, President Bush established himself as a conservative who understood we needed to limit the power of government in favor of a strong, free market economy capable of creating growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all Americans. He also saw the dangers of deep political division that prevented bipartisanship and progress that could empower a stronger future for our hardworking American families. He never forgot about the Texans that put their faith in him and inspired him to continue a career of public service. Once elected, he helped showcase Houston as a booming city, bringing world leaders to Texas and paving the way for the state to become a powerhouse in U.S. politics. Later, even once he left public office, he continued to invest in others, serving as a mentor to many, including his fellow Texan, Congressman turned chairman, Kevin Brady. George Herbert Walker Bush's vision of an American blessed with individuals acting as 1,000 points of light to lift up others, strengthen communities, and selflessly act in times of need exemplified the patriotism and love of our country, so rare around the world today. He understood the importance of building bridges abroad and chose to lead with grace and diplomacy. Through the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany, President Bush led with vision and sound judgment. He proved to the American people that he was no ordinary empty promise politician, cementing his commitment to peace, democracy, and decency for our fellow man. President George H.W. continued to be an inspiration and beacon of life after his presidency through his philanthropic work with organizations like his Points of Light nonprofit, where he promoted volunteerism to create positive change across our nation. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather, cherishing his family and faith above all. After leaving the White House, he settled back in Houston and he opened his presidential library and museum at Texas A&M University in College Station, where he skydived on the lawn to celebrate his 75th birthday. In his inaugural address, President George H.W. Bush said, "I do not mistrust the future. I do not fear for what is ahead. For our problems are large. Our heart is larger. Our challenges are great, but our will is greater." President Bush had faith in something greater than himself and believed America would always preserve. His humility and love of country were at the forefront of his presidency, and his spirit lives on in the enduring impact of his leadership. As we celebrate 100 years of this incredible man, Let us all strive to live up to the example that he set for our nation and choose to be points of light that lift up others and preserve the best of what America has to offer for the rest of the world to follow. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman from Texas for her wonderful remarks about an extraordinary American, George H.W. Bush, our 41st President of the United States.